Around the NFL podcast. Wants more preseason games.
Welcome to another edition of the Around the NFL podcast. My name's Dan Hansis. I come to you from a virtual room filled with some heroes. Greg Rosenthal, Mark Sessler. Boys, the week rolls on. Training camp's opening up. Looks like my boy Zach Wilson even signed a contract. I thankfully tried to steer myself out of all the mentions and the trolling going on in my direction about that. It was going to happen. Zach's in camp. Now the NFL season can start.
Yeah, Zach. Yeah. I mean, I don't... Rookie
lead story.
Rookie holdouts, training camp holdouts. They're a thing of the past. There literally was not a training camp holdout. I guess Zach Wilson was it, but he wasn't under contract, so it doesn't even count.
A pretty soft holdout. I mean, was there any drama that he was going to not show up for weeks? I mean, he was officious enough to get on a red-eye flight last night, then promised he would do something today. I took one of those to the East Coast a couple weeks ago and was an absolute mess on the other side. So I don't know. We'll see how
it's
how
a sign he
progresses.
doesn't take football as seriously as like Mac Jones. Mac Jones is like a grinder. He told his agent, just like, get me in there. Just, I love ball. I want to be out there competing with Cam Newton. I don't want Mike White or whoever's throwing passes, James Morgan for the Jet. I don't want them, ruining practice for a couple days. Like, I love ball. But much like the Detroit Lions a few years ago, Zach Wilson just shows up a few days late.
Ricky, can you put some like echo on my voice? I want to tell you about Mac Jones's inner monologue in his first pro training camp. He's like, he just threw a pass. Like, oh, damn it. Why am I not having fun? I thought I would get to the NFL and I'd be having the time of my life. Why is this? This coach is so mean. Where's the joy? No one smiles up here. Everyone smiled at my old college.
Oh, yeah, Nick Saban. There's a ball of laughs.
Well,
And no one here. Who was that in my ear? Don't know. I want to go back to the way it was, or to another team. I guess I'll have to wait 4 to 5 years. That's what's going on in his head right now. Nobody has fun up there.
well, that's shaky too. That's very shaky if that's true.
All right. Good
Winning's
show
fun.
today.
Winning's fun. That's what Patrick Chung responded when this. I do like this topic comes up a lot in New England, of whether they're having fun or not. Somehow that's become important.
Well, here's the problem. Here's the problem. You can run like a no-nonsense, no-levity operation as long as you win a Super Bowl every other year. But what happens if you stop winning Super Bowls all the time? Is that act going to work as your coach gets older and older? Listen, I'm not saying gradual decline for Bill Belichick, but I am kind of saying it. I don't know if his game is going to work
It was a steep decline last year, so he's facing a big season. His defense, he's a defensive coach, stunk last
You think
year.
there's any scenario?
Forget even the Brady stuff. Like, his defense stunk. He needs a bounce back. I think he'll get it to some degree on defense. There's a little tease for our guest there, Aaron Schatz. He believes, or at least his numbers believe, that the Patriots are going to get it on defense.
That's true.
They have the
Good
Patriots
tease.
looking like a Patriots team from 2 years ago.
It's a little surprising.
Surprising.
Is there any scenario, and now all the Patriots listeners are going to get on Twitter and everywhere else and say what a asshole I am, but is there any scenario where Bill Belichick is ever on the hot seat? Like, will Robert Kraft ever have to fire Bill Belichick? Tom Landry got fired in Dallas. That was ownership change. Maybe it would have to be something like that. Otherwise, Bill can just ride this thing out however long he wants, you'd think.
I think that's probably right, but I do think there is a scenario where Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft stop getting along for whatever reason, and you would imagine it would have to do with losing, and that to me could happen anytime. Because I think there's just like a little bit of tension there in terms of who's the boss, and if things ever went south, I think that's what would happen. But ultimately, it would probably be up to Bill Belichick. Right.
Bill Belichick will leave when he wants to. I think the one thing that he's learned, I mean, if you read any of his sort of autobiographical, books, there's some great ones out there, that what happened to him with Art Modell in Cleveland made him realize that ownership is so important. So, Dan, the thing you're suggesting, where let's say a new owner comes in and wants to sweep everything out, it's a Tom Landry type figure, I think Belichick would be like, there's no way I'm signing up with a new owner.
Well, I
Here we
mean,
go.
Kraft's not going anywhere. That thing is staying in their
They'll
family.
hand it off to the Kraft child, and then that child's child.
he famously went to New England because he wasn't comfortable with the ownership structure incoming with the Jets, which turned out to be a very smart move by Mr. Belichick. All right, enough of that. Yes, Aaron Schatz is coming on. Aaron Schatz is the godfather of DVOA. Or the father? I don't know, because father is better than godfather.
I mean, I think
he
helped to
made
birth
it, so yeah.
Godfather
it's
is like a title of respect. You're like the Don. Greg still hasn't seen the movie, so this is all going over his head. But when you're the actual
putting me
father,
on blast there, yeah, it's kind of embarrassing.
When you're the father of something, you created it, and he did create DVOA. So Aaron Schatz is on the show. His great football Outsiders Almanac just dropped, and we're going to dig into a few of his team projections that jumped out to us. But before we do that, let's hit the news.
Born 1989 in New Orleans, Louisiana, Lil Romeo is the son of music legends, rappers Master P and Sonia C. Signed at just 5 years old after he rapped to his dad, Lil Romeo hit the big time in the early 2000s when his debut single went platinum.
All right, Greg, let me break this down. So, Greg, on the last show, we delved into a hip-hop conversation, and at some point, whenever we start talking hip-hop, at some point, Greg gets a little uncomfortable, says this is the whitest conversation ever. He's always right. He's always right. But here's the thing for me. I depend on Greg to help keep the ship afloat whenever possible.
No,
because Greg does like rap, famously. So we need Greg to be on point. Okay, just like if we're having a conversation about mid-'90s alternative rock, you can depend on me to make sure we're crossing the T's and dotting the I's. So when you, Greg,
Steve Winwood, Mark's got it. He's got it covered.
I've got you in that realm.
Elvis Presley, Mark, right down the
Absolutely not.
He changed the face of American rock. You can
Greg,
believe
don't
what
deflect.
it was like.
Do not deflect, Greg.
Anyway, my point is, you said that Master P's son is Bow Wow. Incorrect.
That's bad. That's
it's
so
Lil
bad.
Romeo. That was from Lil Romeo's Cribs Kid Edition on MTV about 20 years ago. And we just need you to be a little bit better and carry us in those moments. When it gets overly white and ignorant, we need you to jump in and get these things right. Otherwise, it makes us look that much worse.
It was tough. I'm getting older, and it was just like a little brain fart there. I was there when I was in New Orleans. Little Romeo was on the radio and whatnot. Once someone sent the first of roughly 174 tweets telling me I was wrong, I was like, oh yeah, of course. How did I do that in the moment? But it's a live thing, and my brain has been addled over the years for many reasons.
And Lil Romeo also went on to get a D1 scholarship with USC to play basketball. I don't know where things went from there, but
Greg does.
It's a good lesson. Like sometimes, like what makes a good athlete, podcaster, whatever. It's like sometimes you're going to take massive L's and you just have to accept it and then come strong the next time. Like there was this Top Chef contestant on this last season, Dawn, loved her, and she wouldn't get the last item of food on the plate, and that would be like her first course out of 5, and she would respond, and the next 3 courses would be great. That's what I'm going to try to do. She was a former Olympian. I'm like an Olympian in the podcast game.
I mean, you've labeled yourself in the realm of great.
That's the attitude I need to have to bounce back, because it was
I totally glazed
blow.
over there. It's like when Mark makes a Star Wars reference, and it's so foggy. It's like driving on the Palisades Parkway near the George Washington Bridge on a really foggy day, like foggy night. Like that was what it was like just now for me when you made a Top Chef reference. I don't know how how that game works, but it sounds like the contestant struggled.
She struggled, but she would bounce back like a pro. That's what I'm hoping to do.
I mean, Dan, the self-anointed pop culture guy, like has no concept of one of the groupings of films that changed film forever. I find that to be an odd stance. Like,
I have a real blind spot with movies of the 70s and 80s that I've been open about, that I've been trying to check boxes on that. And I know Star Wars is something I'm going to have to hit eventually, because I don't want to deny my children if they get into it. I'm not that type of guy or father, but it's not something that I'm looking forward to.
But one little thing, and then we'll move on, because you put me in a box where like I'm one of these like nerds. Like I would tell you that only 3 of like the 14 films they've done have any traction to me. The rest of it is like
we get this
flotsam in
speech.
space.
We get this speech
No, because
every
I
time,
think- No,
and
because-
the truth comes out at 12:47 on a random Tuesday when you break down your frustrations and your rankings and you're doing it. It's okay. Like you're just like a lot of Star Wars. You're into the whole thing, even if you don't like some of it. You keep coming back strong. They
That's
mean a
also
lot.
incorrect. But
Also-
we can tackle this another time. That is simply incorrect.
We have
Why are you
Mark.
getting so defensive?
Let's not tackle it another time.
You love Star Wars.
I was like, wow, we got
No,
into the
I
news
like-
so quick.
so
It was
I
a real
like some
small
of-
start to the
no,
show.
You
and-
love Star Wars.
yeah.
It's okay.
I
Just
find
say
a lot
it.
of it
Just
to
be
be manufactured
yourself.
junk.
You spend
No.
hours drawing pictures of Star Wars characters.
That's all right. You know what's funny? It's funny because I think the way you are with Star Wars, Mark, is the way I am with what my favorite thing might be, which is the band U2. It's a band that gets a lot of criticism, and to me, despite them being a global act, it's a very private experience for me. Like listening to my favorite band, like most of the time that I've enjoyed my favorite thing, it's alone. So it feels almost intrusive when all of a sudden you have to talk about this thing that you love so much privately. Is Star Wars on some level that to you? You've enjoyed it, hundreds and hundreds of hours of it alone, like staring at Luke Skywalker and what's her name in the bikini with the big monster,
please.
like and you're saying, come on, don't bring me into this. This is my little thing. This is my little world. Stay out of my world.
All right, I think that's well said.
Jabba the Hutt nailed it. Got it.
What a victory for you.
What a victory for the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers. He is back with the team, and he delivered a extended press conference with his media availability on Wednesday, talking about all the things, basically answering a lot of the questions that we've all had throughout the spring and summer. So let's start. Let's let Rodgers speak a little bit here, starting with, did he seriously consider retiring? He says he did.
However, there's still a big competitive hole in my body that I need to fill. And as I got back into my workouts, I just realized that I know I can still play, and I want to still play. And as long as I feel like I can give 100% to the team, then I should still play.
And he also wanted to make it clear that this big to-do around him, nobody should be feeling for Aaron Rodgers. He gets it in the big picture.
I'm not a victim here. I've made a ton of money here, and I've been really fortunate to play a long time and to play here. At the same time, I'm still competitive, and I still feel like I can play. I proved it last year. So,
all right. So, Mark, as we get into this, we had talked about it on Monday. You had mentioned that he was unhappy about a lack of say in personnel. And that is where the focus of his commentary was in this press conference. To me, it feels like it's a little deflecting because I think a guy as proud and touchy as he is, a lot of it really does go back to the simple first-round pick of the kid last year. I still think that, but this probably is part of it. I don't think he's lying. But he cited examples and was very clear that if this is going to work going forward, it can't be the way it was in terms of freezing me out of personnel matters.
I think if anything, after we spent so many months wondering, questioning, theorizing what it was that was at the heart of this, I do think that he was being pretty honest. I mean, he made it clear to some degree. He said it multiple times. It was not about money. And I think if you look at the actual movement or non-movement of money, that stands to be true at this point. I do think it reminds me of someone who has been working, let's say, at a company for a really long time. There have been a lot of changes, a lot of transitions, but they've remained like the biggest producer, the star. And there is, to some degree, I think, a real sense of a lack of respect in the way that he's been treated to some degree. I would say this about Aaron Rodgers. I find him quirky. I don't know if what happened yesterday is
You're
the
not
way
a fan.
I look at it, I can separate the athlete and see how much of an accomplished person he is. But for me, a lot of it is, and I don't, we can get into it, but the naming of all these players that he felt that the organization disrespected. While you were arguing also, and part of his conversation was, I want a seat at the table in movements that we make. Other quarterbacks, and certainly in other sports, we see that, and that's growing. It's not going away. It's getting bigger. And I think Aaron Rodgers sees, someone like Tom Brady and other quarterbacks and says, I want that too. I've earned that. And there's a reason to say you have earned that. But what I think there's the disconnect where it starts to bug me a little bit is that the reparations are made where you mention all these guys that were at most of them at the end of their careers, and a general manager, a lot of it, Ted Thompson, not Brian Gutekunst, had to make tough decisions and move on from certain players. That's what a real GM does. When the Patriots cut a guy 2 years before his value is nothing, they're praised for it. But in this case, the front office took a bullet to the face, which I just simply didn't agree with. And then the turnaround is, hey, now I have a say. We're going to go sign Randall Cobb. To me was illustrative of why most players should not have a seat at the general manager's table. A little bit of influence, we want to listen to you, yes. But all this stuff that Aaron Rodgers has been upset about does not make him qualified to do that job.
No, but he made a pretty good argument. Listening to him, this is what I want out of athletes, is for them to just be transparent in what they say or want. He's obviously very intelligent. And so, I appreciated it. And the way he put it helped convince me, because you're right, Mark. You look at all those moves. First of all, you're not going to get them all right. And when he's bringing up Jordy Nelson and Cobb and Jake Kummerow, I'm like, you're not making the greatest point here, Rodgers, because did those guys look like they had much left after they left Green Bay? No. I think Dan's right. It is a little all to the side of the fact that he wasn't involved in the decision to draft the guy who was to replace him. And that is what it's sort of all about. But I do think the way he put that he just wanted to be involved in the conversation was pretty smart. We have a good clip of it, Ricky, that I'd like to listen to now.
Decisions like that have happened over and over and over again that make me realize that the organization looks at me and my job as just to play. In my opinion, based on what I've accomplished in this league, the way I care about my teammates, the way I show up in the locker room, the way I lead, the way I conduct myself in the community, it should tie myself to a little bit more input. The rules, are the same for most people, but every now and then there's some outliers. Guys who've been in an organization for 17 years and won a few MVPs, where they can be in conversations at a different higher level. I'm not asking for anything that other great quarterbacks across the last few decades have not gotten. The opportunity to just be in conversation. So if you're gonna cut a guy who, based on a meritocracy, was our second best receiver in training camp last year for the majority of camp, maybe run it by me. See what I feel. I might be able to change your mind.
You know what, Greg? He makes points, but I understand what Mark's saying.
It's a new boss syndrome, don't you think? His boss, Gutekunst, is new. He's been there 3 or 4 years or whatever it's been, and Rodgers has been there 17, and that to me is at the heart of it.
To me, there's something unbecoming about the directness and the criticism of the organization in this press conference where he's sitting wearing the Packers hat and the shirt. And I don't know. It's just he's right in the sense that, or he's picking up on what's happening, not just in football, but in professional sports. And I'll cite the NBA specifically, but I'm sure you could find it all over the world in different sports. Now, the players are having a greater voice in terms of the direction of an organization. It's not just, in the case of football, purely from a playing standpoint, shut up and throw a spiral. It's about this guy saying, I should have a bigger voice. You should have me in the room. And that's tricky because that can go either way. But you understand where this is coming from because he's picking up on what's going on in the world. And he makes a good point. I just think with him, specifically citing who's the wide receiver he's referring to there?
I guess Kummerow. I'm guessing he means.
What are we doing here?
Right,
what he's trying to do is he's trying to rub Gutekunst's nose in this stuff now. And it's the same thing with the Randall Cobb move, which, Mark, you said he was signed. It was a trade to get him from the Texans. And guess what? Gutekunst, who let go and let Cobb go in a different direction, went to Dallas, and then he ended up in Houston on a bad contract that Bill O'Brien gave him, overpaid a player in decline. And now, as a make good to Aaron Rodgers, Brian Gutekunst has to publicly trade for this guy. And I don't know if they inherit all the salary. I don't know the specifics on that.
They don't. They're paying 5 out of 8.25 million. The Texans are thrilled, though. The Texans are thrilled anyone took Randall Cobb off their team because I don't think he was even going to make the Texans.
That is Aaron Rodgers. That's just the Cowboys, the Packers getting down and genuflecting in front of him and being like, okay, we'll give in this situation. But I'll tell you what, Aaron Rodgers' play starts going downhill and the Packers are not going to forget any of this. I don't think this is I would imagine this is not a good look behind the scenes. They're very upset the way he's handled this entire saga right down to the press conference, and they will kick his butt out the door as soon as they decide that he's not as valuable as the money that he's getting paid. I don't like it.
But here's the other thing. He openly wants to be somewhere else next year. I don't care what they say. I mean, this is the final year. And I've had Packer fans coming at me because, when you critique this stuff, you don't get us. We're fine. We're happy to have Aaron Rodgers for one more season. Okay, that's a subset of you. But I would also look at some players in the locker room. Like, here's a quarterback, as great as he is. This guy is, and I think players today understand the business side is the business side. You try to bury it and you move on. And I think that's what they'll do. But there have got to be certain personality types in that locker room that say, this guy is telling everyone, I don't want to be here after this season. Because basically Aaron Rodgers did not win this. This is not why he went through all this. I disagree with people that call this a big victory for Aaron Rodgers to have to come back and play the season in Green Bay. I don't agree. I think this thing went sideways. He tried to pull an NBA-type power play, and it didn't work. It did not go perfectly to plan.
I think we should point out a couple of things, just the specifics of what they did with the contract. They did take a year off the end of it. They also adjusted it in a way that, in theory, he could retire next year and they wouldn't take his money back, which isn't really... But it's
not about money, right, Greg?
Right.
That's what Aaron said.
Right, but what that does, it allows him to control a trade process, because he, that way, can essentially say, I won't go to the Panthers or I'll retire. And it just gives, and they know that too. It's not like they're surprised by this. It just helps him to control a trade. But I do think we should say, like, he said, I am not closing the door on things changing here and that I'm possibly here. So he knows, like, look, if they win the Super Bowl this year, or he wins the MVP, it's like, he's probably going to be on the Packers again next year. He's not going to stamp his foot, and they'll probably just change where they're at. Like, that part of it, I appreciated that he said that. I think that was newsworthy. And all this only happened because the Packers misevaluated him. That is the number one thing. They thought he was in decline, and they made a decision to take Love. They were making a calculated risk that Rodgers is only going to be here 2 years. They thought he was in decline. His play last year was ultimately like the surprise, and now all this mess
I disagree,
happens.
This didn't all happen. It didn't all happen.
He was
just
in decline,
because of Jordan Love. It happened because the Packers tried to make a business decision. And the quarterback, it wasn't enough of a W.
If they thought he was going to play close to an MVP level, they wouldn't draft
I'm not saying
Jordan
the
Love.
evaluation was right, but this happened. This entire mess this summer happened because it wasn't enough for the quarterback to win MVP and basically show everyone, hey, you messed up. He needed to take it that extra step. To me, that's ego, and that's what this has been about. I think that, to me, is why this happened. It's Aaron Rodgers more than the Packers.
I hear you, and I think that's fair, but I did find him credible. And the one thing he was probably more adamant about than anything was that those leaks weren't coming from me. You can say what you want about the drama that was happening this summer. And he was saying, I can promise you that is not coming from me or my camp. And I believe him. Like, I believe him on that.
You know what? He could have slowed this down a long time ago, Greg.
Like, if you want to complain about Schefter having certain things or the way things like that, I don't think that was coming from Aaron Rodgers. I think everything that came out was because the Packers wanted it to come out on some level.
He did not have to wait till July 28th to put a stop to some of this madness. That's the one thing I'd say. I mean, he said he spent the summer in introspective states working on his mental health. That is good. Yep. I think that's good for anyone. But he could have slowed down this drama wheel. And frankly, I think a way that a lot of the media bowed down to him yesterday, I found that got on my nerves.
It's only drama for people like us who follow this closely and hardcore fans. Like for 80% of America, like they knew that he was out and then he's back, like by the time it matters, and like nothing ultimately changed. We're more annoyed about it because we have to cover it.
That also doesn't excuse it, though. I don't know why we're continually making excuses for what happened here. And it's like if
Aaron Rodgers walks into the middle of a dry forest and lights a match and sets the whole thing ablaze and then walks away, and then the Packers, as the forward-facing franchise that is at the center of the ire that Rodgers has toward the team, they're getting on a daily basis barraged with information seekers and trying to handle the situation. Just because Rodgers isn't the one leaking stories, he started it.
Rodgers would say Gutekunst started it by drafting Love. Right. I mean, it's true. It's true.
We mentioned the Houston Texans, and it's...
We should mention, by the way, Devontae Adams is press conference just quickly afterwards was, to me, almost a little more newsworthy, that he said, of course, I'm not taking $1 less to stay with Aaron Rodgers. Basically said, it'd be nice to play with Aaron Rodgers, but I don't care where Aaron Rodgers plays next year. That has no impact on my negotiations. I am going to be the highest paid receiver in the league because that's what I deserve, and they're not offering me that, and that's just my stance now, and I'm not accepting anything less from any team. And if you want to play me with, Tim Boyle next year in Detroit, I'll do it if you make me the highest paid receiver in the league. I thought that was interesting because keeping them both is tough.
I would hope he realizes he'll probably make more money if he takes a big paycheck from a team that has a really good quarterback in place. But yes, he should not take any discount. Make your money when you can. And if the Packers won't do it, there are 10 other. Right now, it's a golden age for quarterbacks. In our league, there are 8 other quarterbacks who might end up in the Hall of Fame. Go sign with one of those teams that I'm sure would happily pay you what you want. All right, Deshaun Watson. Listen, we talked about it on Monday. We don't need to dive deep on some of the less savory aspects of what's going on with his story right now. But you should know that, yes, he is at training camp for the Texans, as is contractually obligated for Watson to be. But it doesn't sound like Texans head coach David Culley, who, again, feels like he's full on being asked to arrange the deck chairs on the Titanic here. A really tough situation for Culley right now. And Culley said Watson is behind because he missed offseason workouts, needs as many reps as possible, and he's being used, Watson, this is an all-pro quarterback, an MVP-level player, as a fourth-string quarterback in practice. He also got some snaps at safety and running back. It all plays out like farce right now. Mark Sessler, what's your read on this?
Well, I think it is a farce. I don't know. I don't understand, number one, if you're the Texans, why as we mentioned last show, we're not going to fine you, but we don't need you here because this just simply needs to be taken care of before we have this happening. It is the last kind of news story that should be occurring right now. And I would say one thing. I don't know. Again, we don't know where the NFL is on their investigation. They clearly haven't come to its conclusion. But someone like Ezekiel Elliott, who went through that whole suspension process, a couple years ago, that happened without anything officially occurring legally outside. The NFL came to a decision, and I don't know why we're in a place where anyone is saying it's a good idea to have Deshaun Watson out on the field, in front of cameras, practicing right now with what's going on behind the scenes.
What is the point? He's
no
playing
point.
Safety? What is happening? Are you kidding me? I don't know who to blame. I don't care almost who to blame, but it doesn't make any sense. And they don't want Deshaun Watson out there when tackling is starting in a couple of days. This is coming to a head, and I think it's going to end with Deshaun Watson no longer practicing with the Texans. So what are we waiting for? I mean, he's out there playing safety. It's crazy. And a lot of, I think, listeners, because I've seen some tweets about it, are misunderstanding. There is a criminal investigation. Like, more women came forward this week. It's up to 10 women. Some aren't involved actually in the civil investigation. So Houston police is doing their investigation. The civil case is over 20. And whether he's allowed to play or not while that's going on, I guess there are reasonable ways that you could argue about that, but nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. The only thing I think that changed was I think the Texans, and to a lesser degree the NFL and Deshaun Watson, thought we can get away with this, that there isn't going to be, that it kind of quieted down and that people aren't going to be upset. But if the point is what I think the point is to show that he's out there, he's healthy, whatever, and he can be traded right now. Because I think it's been made clear the Texans want to trade him. But I don't think they're getting offers. I don't think teams are interested in it right now. So it just seems like kind of a farce with no easy solution. It's crazy.
And just in another sport right now, Major League Baseball, Trevor Bauer is an all-star pitcher for the Los Angeles Dodgers. He is right now involved in a criminal investigation for sexual assault for a situation that went down with a partner he had that he met online. And MLB's response to that is we got to get this guy off the field. So they set a 1-week administrative leave, they called it. And they've extended it now, I believe, 3 weeks. And now it's extended through August 6th because, again, the wheels of justice turn much more slowly than a sports calendar. And it's the NFL needs to do whatever that is. Is that the commissioner's exemplus? I don't know. But you got to get Deshaun Watson out of the picture until we have more clarity. Come on, common sense police, come in. In other news, my goodness, Xavier Howard led the NFL in interceptions last year. He had 10. The most since, I believe, Ty Law and the Jets back in 2007.
Wow.
For a really bad Jets team, by the way. Anyway, Rap Sheet reports that multiple teams have called the Dolphins inquiring about trading for the cornerback. He has requested a trade. He went on Instagram, laid out all of his issues. He doesn't like that the contract he signed 2 years ago is out of date and not in line with his level of play last season when he was an All-Pro. He doesn't like that he's not even the highest paid player in his own secondary.
Not even close,
point.
He points out. That's
Yes,
Byron Jones.
Byron Jones has that offer. So, Greg, where do you come down on this? First of all, who cares? He wants more money. He's outplayed his contract. We can get bogged down in that conversation if we wish. More interesting to me is, do the Dolphins really trade a player at this level when they're trying to take the next step? And if they do, what kind of value do you think he could bring back in a trade?
It sounds like they're listening. You know, they gave him that contract. He's under contract for 4 more years. In one of those 2 years, he missed a huge chunk of the season and didn't play like particularly well. He had the domestic violence arrest in between the seasons, and then he was out of this world. My issue is that arrest is not stopping him from playing football. No one is saying that. But it has to be mentioned in the context of the trade because I think it absolutely affects the negotiation that he's going to have in a new contract. I think it also could affect the Dolphins' willingness to rip up a contract in good faith with 4 years left on it. And it's been left out. I've seen some long analyses about his situation that literally don't mention it. And I'm not saying like that has to stop him from playing. The NFL is clearly not suspending him. Like, of course, he still has value, but I think that's going to change the value that the Dolphins see in him potentially, and another team sees in him because he's a riskier pickup. He's still one of the top 7 or 8 cornerbacks in the league in terms of average value of his contract. So it's not like he's getting paid nothing. I think it makes it very tricky. If that wasn't an issue, I think he could maybe get a first-round pick. And considering Tyreek Hill's contract and everything else, maybe it's not going to be an issue for some team. But I think it probably is an issue for this Dolphins team in terms of being interested in ripping up his deal right now.
I think that's perfectly said because it's like they know him. They know what they're dealing with. Obviously, you know, you could argue he's their best player. But this other side of it, the off-the-field stuff, that probably slowed the wheels on them wanting to listen to him. And I get that he's sitting in a tape study room with Byron Jones, seeing Byron Jones not do things he can do. And we talked about on the last show that like you're with a coworker who you find out's making a lot more money than you.
How does Byron Jones feel right now reading this Instagram post?
Of course. But I do think that, you know, not to be cynical, but there will always be another team that will look past the off the field stuff, trade for him and give him a new contract. I just assume that's what will happen if Miami is unwilling to do so.
2 years ago, the Dolphins stuck in another squabble with a star member of the secondary, traded Minkah Fitzpatrick to the Steelers for the 18th overall pick in the next draft. Kind of feels like where this could be heading, but we shall see. There's more COVID news, by the way, but I'm just pushing it back to the end of news. I just don't want to talk about it. Okay, so let's instead talk about how Michael Thomas might be a knucklehead and the Saints and the star wide receiver probably headed for a divorce sooner rather than later. Speaking on Wednesday, Saints coach Sean Payton said that Michael Thomas should have undergone his ankle operation earlier and still waiting till summer. Here is a little bit from Payton.
Well, look, it appears we're going to have to spend some time without him. It's disappointing, and we'll work through it with the other players that are here. But the surgery took place, and obviously we would have liked that to have happened earlier than later. And quite honestly, it should have.
Ooh, he ain't happy, Greg.
I can see this Saints season going a lot of ways. Aaron Schatz, who's going to be on later, has the Saints pretty high, the Football Outsiders do. In the first 8 weeks of the season, they play the Packers, they're at New England, they're at Seattle, Tampa's in there. That's not in a row, but those are some of the hardest games in the first 8. That's all before the trade deadline. I think one of the scenarios, at least for the Saints, is they do not have a winning record. In those 8 games, they have a losing record, and that Michael Thomas is taking up a lot of airtime on NFL Network in this podcast as a potential trade candidate.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at like Marquez Callaway now playing a major role, and we were kidding about little Jordan Humphrey last show, but he now is a factor. I mean, they signed Chris Hogan, who you're not in this day and age thinking is going to play a major
He was
role
playing
for your
pro
offense.
lacrosse. He was literally playing pro lacrosse. I don't know how good he was.
Any
or
starting
what
wide
was happening.
receiver for the 2020 New York Jets you do not want on your roster, and they need help at wide receiver because, by the way, Saints wide receiver Deontay Harris, he was arrested. It wasn't reported until this week, but on July 16th, he got himself popped on a DUI. And that usually leads to a suspension of 2 games. So they might be without him as well. So, again, we talked about a little bit on Monday. The Saints, big question mark around that team. I'm not doing the COVID story yet.
And they got to play Aaron Rodgers in week 1. It's been a bad week for the Saints. That's the Fox 425 week 1 game. Troy, Joe, settle in. Will we be at our new studio? We don't know.
We don't know. It could be Boar 25 by the end of the second quarter. Nailed it. The Washington football team re-signed defensive tackle Jonathan Allen to a 4-year, $72 million contract extension. Mark, you got to love what the Washington football team is doing. They are getting nasty in those trenches, and they think we got a good thing going on both sides of the ball. Let's get Jonathan Allen under contract for a bunch more years.
No-brainer to get the contract. He turns 30 at the end of it, so he'll probably get another contract. I mean, Montez Sweat is going to get paid at some point. You're obviously going to keep Chase Young around for a long time. So I think, when you watch Jonathan Allen, the one thing about him is he had the lowest percentage of any interior defender in the league of pressures created when he had multiple people on him. I mean, this guy is constantly getting double and triple teamed and throwing people off left and right. His tape is pretty fascinating, and I think he's the heart and soul of that interior line. I mean, they're nasty for a reason. If you want to look at the Washington team as a playoff team, it starts with that defensive front.
Was Sessler breaking down some Jonathan Allen
doing.
tape on
I mean,
Game Pass?
look at I went out and watched some stuff, and I mean, there's
He
actually
is
been
back.
a couple people that were crowing about him before the extension, where they put like one of these like 18 kind of clips in a row of what he did, and the guy is like just he's like a car standing up with arms throwing people around. I like
a sneaky amount of the best players on Washington were drafted in that like 18 months or 2 years that Scott McLuhan was there.
Yeah.
Who before he left in unfortunate circumstances. But a lot of those picks are the ones that are the highest paid players on Washington right now.
Well, McLuhan also pushed for Baker Mayfield to be picked by the Browns at number 1, so he's got his fingerprints all over the place.
Dak Prescott underwent an MRI after leaving Wednesday's practice with arm soreness, diagnosed with a strained muscle in his throwing shoulder. Mike McCarthy said after the fact that the injury is, quote, minor, but it does appear that it will cost him some time. And then our own Jane Slater, friend of the show, tweeted out just a few minutes ago, in fact, that he is practicing Dak Prescott. However, he's acting as a running back for backups and individual drills. He throws the ball back with his left non-throwing hand. Jane added, he's out there with the quarterbacks as well, going through scramble drills, dropping back with feet, but not throwing the ball. While doing it, the crowd is singing him happy birthday.
Oh, that's
Happy
nice.
birthday, Dak Prescott.
Happy birthday.
I'm
He's gotta be disappointed.
personally not worried. I'm not worried about this. If I'm a Cowboys fan, I'm not worried about it unless a week from now he's still throwing it left-handed with the running backs.
Well, that's the sound of it. It sounds like it's going to be 2 to 3 weeks. The local reporters believe that's how he's going to sit.
That's a little bit different.
And look, of course, we hope Dak's fine. He more than likely, it's probably not a huge issue. But here's the thing: they talk out of both sides of their mouth. Oh, this is not a big story. They also say how vital every one of these practices are, how important it is that Dak's back out there, like how much he's gaining from it. You do not go get an MRI, and then you do not, after looking at that MRI, sit the guy for 2 to 3 weeks if there's no concern whatsoever. It's this weird time of year where it's always like, oh, everyone's going to be fine by week 1. That's what they said about Amari Cooper and DeMarcus Lawrence at one point. Oh, they're going to be fine by training camp. Oh, it turns out they're going to miss the first 3 or 4 weeks after major surgery. They've been out for 7 months. Like, at some point, it's fair to be skeptical, and I just don't think it means nothing. Like, it's a little bit of a concern to have a shoulder problem right off the bat.
Yeah, it's a throwing shoulder. I mean, of course it's a concern, and it's the kind of thing that can, it could nag. It could go on. But I would say this, like, I think the real acid test would be if this happened in week 2, how quickly would he practice or play. I mean, there is logic to just saying, see you later. We don't need you on the field on any level until the games matter.
Especially when your backup's still Cooper Rush. What are we doing here? We just went through a whole season, Cowboys, and your backup is like, what?
And I think I think they came in and threw 5 interceptions as a trio, the backup quarterbacks today, which I get it. It's a practice, but still it was like they were dominated by the Cowboys defense. So if one of those guys are seeing live bullets, el problemo.
Isn't it cute when your kids say something and it's so cute that you can't even correct them? My son Harry today said he's possessed by a video, and he meant obsessed, but I just couldn't correct him. It was too cute. And my eldest son Jack, about 3 years ago or 4 years ago, doing various like Batman and Joker things, he was like, "Oh, he got dropped into the acid instead of acid," and I've never corrected him. And now he's almost 7 years old, and he still says acid. But I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose that.
You can't step in.
Colton refers to
girls as goyles.
Goyles.
He's like, I like. Do you talk to girls in your class along with boys? He goes, I don't talk to the goyles. It's like, I'm just gonna let you roll with that. I think that sounds very Popeye-ish.
My grandfather, Keith Hans's dad, Paul, we knew him as Baba, pronounced the girls as goyles till the very end. He lived till he was 91. So if you don't get a handle of it, that's where it's heading.
Well, you're right.
But I found it to be endearing, but just a heads up. It might not correct itself.
It might, like a lot of things get like made fun out of you sometimes in middle school. That's like the time, or maybe early high school. Sometimes if a kid starts pointing that out, but it could go the other way. People could find it totally charming. It could sweep the greater Los Angeles area.
Well, it's his journey.
Baba drove a bus in New York City, and he called everybody Sam. Like, "Oh, Sam, best part of driving a bus are the goyles. You pick them up."
Best part.
All right, finally in the news, ESPN's Adam Schefter reported that Lamar Jackson not participating in Ravens training camp due to a, quote, COVID-related case the league is still trying to process. Mike Garafolo followed up that report, said it's unclear how long Jackson will be out. And Jackson missed time last year after testing positive for COVID-19. There were a bunch of outbreaks on the Ravens last year. So you got Trace McSorley and Tyler Huntley taking snaps at Ravens camp. And if you're wondering, of course, everyone is Lamar Jackson vaccinated? He's gotten it sick twice now. It's private. We don't know. That's how he answered the question back in June, that he wasn't going to answer it. They have clarified, though, for the listeners, he did test positive for COVID. They announced that. And a lot of players are. Gus Edwards did. I was surprised. I think the other day, 14 positive tests, because they are clarifying now who's testing positive. There's almost no players missing time for being a close contact. And there's been double-digit players testing positive for COVID multiple days. And we'll kind of know, Dan, probably, whether he was vaccinated or not, because the rule is if you aren't vaccinated, you are out minimum 10 days, and then after that, you have to pass tests. If you are vaccinated, you can come back quicker if you start testing negative sooner than that. So if for some reason he came back sooner, we would know. But that's a pretty big chunk of training camp after it took him out in the middle of the playoff race last year.
The thing that stands out to me also, Trace McSorley, Tyler Huntley. You lost Lamar Jackson a year ago for a game. He's the kind of quarterback that, he's been lucky injury-wise, but he's the kind of quarterback that could, at some point take the type of hit that takes him out for a bit. This team has not done enough at backup quarterback because the way they looked, even with RG3 in there a year ago, one of the worst offenses in the league without Lamar Jackson in there.
Do you think anybody
non-functional
that's answering it's private to the COVID vaccine question actually got the vaccine?
No.
And they're choosing to be private about it?
I think that
or
seems to be
like
the lingo of
it's a code for we haven't gotten it. The only thing is a lot of players in mid-June had not been vaccinated. The league rate was under 50 at that point. Now they said it's 90 or close to 90 league-wide. Like Darnold, for instance, was pretty vocal about that he didn't want to get it, and then in the meantime he has. So we don't know if Lamar did in the meantime, but yeah, usually
I do think
don't
though
answer that
we
question.
should start waltzing around because we have been, but let's start telling people it's private. No, we did it, but you're gonna think something about me, but it's not gonna be true. I've tricked you.
I like that. I don't know what you get out of it ultimately.
I
in
get
terms
nothing.
Of positive,
Mystery.
but-
I get literally nothing. In fact, I would
But
probably
it's not
be
a mystery,
shunned, you know.
because we've already now deduced that that's you're telling everyone you haven't got. But still, why not,
Well,
Mark?
That's fair.
That's what's happening in the news. All right, coming up next. Oh, this is good. This is good, boys. You got to get the tastemakers, the intellectual tastemakers of the football cognoscenti involved with this program. Okay. And here's one of them. Our next guest is the creator of Football Outsiders. He's the guy behind most of their original statistical methods in terms of NFL analysis. And then he's the lead writer. He's the editor. He's the statistician on that book series, Football Outsiders Almanac, which is the Bible. It's out now. Get it. If you want to get caught up to where things are in the NFL right now, dive into it. Here he is, Aaron Schatz. Welcome to the Around the NFL podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. It's great to be on with you guys.
Oh, it is great to
Thanks for
have
having-
you,
thanks for
Aaron.
coming on.
And,
Yeah.
you know, and again, check it out, because it's not just, Aaron and his team don't just pick out certain teams. Everybody gets the deep dive. They get what I like to call, and something we like to do on the show, the inside the NFL and the 80s treatment. Everybody gets their time. And if you dive in, you'll see a win projection, and there's a lot of math involved and study and analytical deep diving. So we're going to point out some of these that really jumped out to us. And Mark, I want you to get us going, because one team that's near and dear to your heart is not as high in the world of Football Outsiders as it is elsewhere.
Yeah, I would just want to say, first of all, that anyone who has never really read one of these epics that come out, the minute they come out, I know my summer's over, and a tornado is approaching. But
so
You're
there's
like a
negative
harbinger of
connotation to
doom,
what Aaron
Schatz.
does?
the what?
Is there a negative connotation to what Aaron does?
No.
at some level?
It's kind of, to me, it's sort of it's a bookend on the season beginning. But there's some really wonderful writing too. I think that what you guys do, it's not just data. It is some really incredible descriptions, and there's a lot of humor in there. So it's a fun read. All right, yes. So let's get to it. My team, the Cleveland Browns. You know, you've put them at an 8.6 win estimation. Now that has them as the 8th team in the AFC and out of the playoffs. Now, here's the thing. I am someone who already is inside thinking, when the entire nation is jumping on Cleveland, which happens like maybe once every 14 years, only bad things can happen. But when it comes from you guys, I start to get a little concerned, because I trust where you're coming from with this. What is happening with the Cleveland Browns? Why are you zigging when so many other people are zagging?
Yeah, I know it's tough because it's such an analytically oriented organization. Like, we want to root for them. Like, we want them to do well. But the problem is the Browns were not as good as their record last year overall. First of all, they were, I think, 17th in our DVOA rankings, despite being 11-5. DVOA is the main statistic that we use at Football Outsiders. They were outscored by their opponents, despite being 11-5. If you look at projecting teams based solely on points scored and allowed, what they call the Pythagorean win theorem, the Browns were one of the 10 biggest overachievers since the merger. So a lot of last year's sort of mediocre performance is tied up with 2 games when they got completely blown out by the Steelers and the Ravens early in the season. And you also have to kind of throw out the game against the Jets, where they didn't have any wide receivers available. But even if you take those games out of the projection, when we look at the numbers from last year that we use in our projection, their projection only improves a little bit. Their offense is good, but not great. I think we have projected something like 8th in the league, which is around where it was last year. And their defense is just like, they added some guys, but they also lost a lot of guys. Like, there's no Ogunjobi anymore. There's no Sheldon Richardson. There's no Olivier Vernon. They added secondary guys, and they lost defensive linemen.
But is there any thought in terms of the projections of like second year offenses? Like there was such an improvement on their offenses, or is that more working against them, that like there was that big of a jump last year in terms of what they did offensively in their offensive line, and that maybe that's going to be harder to keep up than people think?
Yeah, it's sort of a balance between those two ideas. Like normally in your first year with new coordinators and a new system, all other things being equal, you take a little bit of a step back. Obviously, Cleveland did not, right? They got a lot better on offense. So the fact that they're likely to get a little bit even better than that in their second year is offset by the fact that they already jumped so much last year that you see, teams that normally jump a lot on one side of the ball tend to come back to the pack a little bit the following year. So the projection sort of balances those two things out.
I think it's fair. I mean, it's,
And Aaron, and a lot of the hype around and it's kind of, you're on an island a little bit industry wise, because you kind of see a lot of people seeing the Browns as not just potentially an AFC North favorite, but a Super Bowl contender. And perhaps they will be. We will find out. And then maybe you'll have to write a mea culpa next year. We'll find out in time. But a lot of people point to the Browns, and I'll use them as an example to get into the next team here. The moves they made in free agency and the draft to fortify the middle of their defense, their secondary. And when you add in a healthy Jadeveon Clowney, Myles Garrett, of course, now at full health post-COVID, they'll make the leap. It's all projection, though. The Chicago Bears, with that said, a team 8-8 last year. They played like an 8-8 team. They finished 8-8. They snuck in the playoffs, got beat. You have them projected in 2021 at 7.3 wins. And I'm curious how, with what you do, because Justin Fields, what he brought to this organization, at least at the start, is hope. They're in the hope game again because of Justin Fields. But for you and your job, how do you come down at they're actually not going to be better? They'll take a step back despite having this dynamic young player that we've never seen at this level.
The fact is, dynamic young quarterbacks don't tend to play well in their rookie years. Like, for example, a lot of people feel like Miami should have already moved on from Tua Tagovailoa based on how he played last year. Do you know that Tua Tagovailoa had an above average year for a first round quarterback?
Going back how far? Like
going back to 1983, but that's normalized for, our stats normalized. So we know that, right, passing stats are way bigger now than they were 30 years ago. So that's accounted for. He had an above average year when you compare him to he was below average for the league, but for a first round quarterback, he was above average. And a lot of people don't even think of him as a promising young quarterback anymore. The fact is, we want to believe that these guys are all going to come in and be like what Justin Herbert was last year, but a lot of them don't. And you don't know who's going to be that guy who performs in his rookie year until you see him actually do it. So you have to kind of go into the year expecting that rookie quarterbacks are going to struggle, even first round picks.
Like, do you feel like you have to be stronger, like as an individual, to be such a wet blanket over all this hope? Aaron, like Mark's depressed right now.
No.
You've crushed his dreams. There's Bears fans listening. You've crushed their dreams. Like, how do you hold up with that?
Oh, I'm here for all of the Vikings fans and the teams where we're higher on them than the average.
You pick a team or two that you think people aren't as high on as they should be.
Before we get to that, because it connects to what we just said with Justin Fields and rookie quarterbacks. I see you got the Jacksonville Jaguars pegged for 7.1, I believe. So yes. Is this because Lawrence is a true outlier, or is this one of those teams where people it got fogged over a little bit because of the 1-15 and how it closed out, but there's actually more talent on this? Like, what are the factors that contribute to this team potentially jumping into near contention in the playoff race?
Yeah, I think it's more the idea that there's probably more talent on this team than people thought there was last year, despite having the worst record. They weren't our worst team, despite having the worst record. The Jets were. And there's just a lot of regression. The general statistical idea that teams tend to regress towards the mean, so bad teams get better. There is, adding the number one pick is good in that we think that Lawrence is better than Gardner Minshew, but it's, again, like we're not projecting Lawrence to have an above average year because you just can't project a rookie quarterback to be above average. But I think their defense is better than people give them credit for. There's a lot of talent. young talent on that defense. Henderson only played 8 games last year. Josh Allen only played 8 games last year. And as we know, all Josh Allens in their third years get much, much better than they were before. So I'm expecting Josh Allen, the defensive end, to have like 46 sacks this year.
I got to admit, I think I made some like they've got the better Josh Allen jokes like when he was playing well as a rookie.
I made those jokes.
Like all of my Josh Allen Bills references from the first 2 seasons of his career. I look like an idiot right now.
The analytics world looks more like an idiot than anybody else. So, I mean, listen, I feel like Josh Allen is really the outlier. Like, you cannot expect quarterbacks with his kind of college accuracy to suddenly transform in the NFL the way he did. If all that mechanical stuff that Jordan Palmer does with him and that they've had videos released, if that stuff really works, it totally changes the way you draft quarterbacks. But I'd need to see it work with someone else before I'm going to go drafting guys who are under 60% in college.
Greg, read to Aaron because I liked where you were going with that.
Yeah, like instead of the doom and gloom here, are there teams that your projection system loves this year more than probably most the analysts, and that you believe in too? Because I do see the thing you do sometimes, or it's in the writing, but or when you're talking, it's like, well, the projections like them a lot. I like that surprises me. I'm not sure, but which ones, are you guys high on that you believe in?
Sure, I'll give you 2 teams that we're really high on that other people are not quite as high as we are. One is Minnesota Vikings. There are a lot of reasons to believe. Last year, they were sort of playoff contenders, but it was really a rebuilding year. And there's a lot of ways in which they were particularly outliers in stats that tend to regress to the mean much stronger. Like their special teams were terrible. And they were like most of their sacks they took on third down. And there was a huge difference between their offense on first and second down and their offense on third down. And that, your offense on third down tends to change to like meet what your offense is overall. Schedule strength is another one, although we have Minnesota projected with a hard schedule again. We have the whole NFC North projected with hard schedules. But we just think that that's a team that's going to be in playoff contention. I mean, they would have been the division favorite if Aaron Rodgers had been traded, but now everybody's making nice in Green Bay, so you can probably throw that out the window. But I think they're going to definitely be in playoff contention. The other is the New England Patriots. So we have this variable in the defensive projections that based on personnel, right? Like how much personnel do you lose? And last year, the Patriots lost more personnel than any team we had tracked in this variable on defense since 2003. And that was before the COVID opt-outs. And then the COVID opt-outs just took that to a ridiculous level. This year, the Patriots are adding on net more defensive talent than any team we've tracked since 2003. When you include Hightower returning and then all those guys they signed in free agency like Godshaw and Judon and Jalen Mills, and even to Harvey Lange, like just a ton of guys, they have a bunch of added defensive talent. And so we really like the Patriots to return to the playoffs this year, even though we don't think their offense is going to be above average.
How many people are just hitting you that you're just a homer, though? Because you are a Patriots fan.
I will say I am a Patriots fan, and I admit it. And I will say Denver is 5th in that same stat where the Patriots are 1st. So we also like Denver. So there's a non-homer pick for you if you think the Patriots are a homer pick.
There you go. Aaron Schatz, you've said it all. Follow him on Twitter at FO_A Schatz, SCHATZ, and go over to footballoutsiders.com if you want to get your hands on this almanac, which again, whether you're just want to bone up for the season, if you're a fantasy head, there's a lot to find there as well. Aaron, thank you very much. And I'm sorry that you are connected to doom and gloom for Mark Sessler and his personal life, but that's not your fault.
It's not your fault. It's just the way life is.
It's just the way the numbers roll out of the computer, man. I've got nothing against Cleveland. I would love for those fans to have a winner, and I know people in the front office, so I'm rooting for them.
It hurt when they got rid of Sashi. It hurt you more than most.
It hurt when they got rid of Sashi, but our man Andrew Healy is still in the front office, so we're doing good with Cleveland.
All right.
There he goes, Aaron Schatz. Thank you very, very much. All right. Good stuff. Good show. We're rolling. The season's coming like a freight train. coming
Little
tomorrow.
Little Pat's hype, unbiased.
A little bit. I don't
know what I think about this. What a weird team they are.
The idea
I think
that
they
they're
are a
going to
clear
be the
bounce
85
back
Bears on
team.
defense feels a little overplayed, but I still think they have too many questions on offense. But I'm also, if Aaron Schatz is a Pats lover, you know who I am. So
I trust his computer.
The Pats to me strike me as your classic 9-8 team.
Sounds about right.
But I mean, he has them at 9.8 wins. So
right,
that's right there.
10-7, and they're going to the playoffs. 10-7. But all right, good stuff.
One little item before we go.
Yes.
We have a real friend of the show who we met on our first trip to London. Tracy Crouch used to work in the House of Commons. I have received word. Greg and Eric and I were lucky to go on a tour of the House of Commons with her and another friend, Tim Shipman. And we saw like the Queen's. Greg, do you remember this? We saw the Queen's toilet, which most people are not alled to see.
We're actually responsible for Brexit. We got that going.
We did. Yeah, very popular. Anyways, Tracy Crouch, it was her birthday last week, and she has just, we have just heard that her partner Steve proposed to her to be married. So that is a huge congratulations from our show.
Congratulations.
Love it.
If I had watched The Crown before we had gone to London, I would have went with you that day. But as I recall, both Wes and myself said, no, we're just going to lay in our hotel rooms, respective hotel rooms for 6 hours.
This doesn't happen in the U.S. Like multiple dignitaries don't reach out to us to be like, hey, let's give you a private tour of Congress or whatnot. But when we're over there, it's just like roll out the red carpet.
It happened.
Yeah. Serious respect, Dan. I know you're all about respect.
I am all about respect. I would like to go to invite us to the San Bernardino town council meeting. We'll be there.
You ever been to San Bernardino? I don't think you want to go
government. We're just into it. All right. We drove to Big Bear a few years back. It was me, Mark, and Wes. And Mark kept on talking up this bar in San Bernardino. We got to stop at this bar in San Bernardino. And so sure enough, we said, okay, Mark, we'll stop there. We pull into this place, and if you've ever seen the movie, Quentin Tarantino wrote it. I think Robert Rodriguez directed it, From Dusk Till Dawn, when George Clooney and Tarantino in an acting role get locked into a bar that actually is a vampire hangout, and they just devour all truckers and anyone that's a living soul. Great movie, very violent, very just fun. Check it out, Dusk Till Dawn. That's where Mark took us in San Bernardino. I'll never forget that bar, just the sense of darkness that hung over it.
Well, all right. So the first time I had gone, it had a little bit of a different vibe, but you are correct. That was the vibe that day. And I don't even think we stayed for more than 5 minutes. I think we hauled it out of there.
We stayed. We stayed
Did
for
we?
a couple of rounds because we kept on waiting. Wes and I was like, what is the magic of this place that Mark hyped up so much? And the magic never came.
Yikes.
Well, ownership change.
Anyway, always good to reminisce about the good old days. Yes, Friday, tomorrow, Around the NFL broadcast. We're making some changes to that show, and we're working on it, and we're looking forward to unveiling the broadcast 2.0 come week 1. But we still have great stuff coming up for you on Friday on the TV side, and then we'll be back Monday with another edition of This Fair Podcast. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to Lil Romeo for understanding that a mistake was made, and Greg was a class act all the way, owning up to it.
Does he understand? I mean, this is more pop than Lil Romeo's had in a minute. No,
you always got to get that dig in.
Why are you digging a new hole? Yeah.
All right. Dan Hands is signing off for Lil. What did we decide? Lil 60?
Lil, I don't know. Lil G.
Lil G. The old, the Sizzler, we call it, Old Quiet Storm. And Ricky Hollywood behind the virtual glass. Till Monday, heed the call.